Hello, everybody. We are back into another episode of Around the Octagon, trying out a new little intro. Not sure how that worked out, but I'm your host, Zach, joined by the full crew tonight. Today, we're here to break down UFC Vegas 111, Bonfim versus Brown. We're going to go through that main card. But before we do, fellas, we have some news that we have to talk about from last weekend. Really, the story that took the whole MMA world by storm, Dolgarian versus Dave Aye. Apparently the UFC's partner, not even apparently, but the UFC's partner, Integrity Compliance 360, flagged the Isaac Dolgarian fight for suspicious bets, line movement prior to the fight. Dana White and the UFC said they reached out to Dolgarian. He said nothing was up. I'm going to go out there and fuck up this the Cuban problem, and then proceeded to lose by exactly how the odds shifted. Son, I'll let you kick this one off. Well, I'll start with you. How big of a concern is this for the UFC and just the sport of MMA in general?
Yeah, I mean, Del Valle is the Cuban problem. This seems to be the UFC problem. And really, it's a combat sports problem. It's been happening, I mean, for probably about 100 years now, since boxing became a big sport, since combat sports were really, mainstream and in the media here in the United States as well as other countries. But, for us, it's closer to home here in the United States. You see a lot of fight fixing. It's been a thing. I mean, there's countless stories of boxing back in the day, of fight fixes. I think to me, it just kind of its roots are in the pay system and, a lot of the benefit system of the fight game and how it just works. You see any other sport. I know we talked about this, Zach, any other sport, even if you're out of season, you're getting health benefits and health insurance and things like that. UFC and boxing, for the most part, is not one of those sports that covers, year round, unless you have a fight booked, which is, one of those things. And not only that, but the pay is so low, it's easy for a guy with a lot of money to buy out these fighters. Yeah, let's say, whatever the minimum is, I think it's $15,000 for show, $15,000 for win, plus any bonus you win. It would be $50,000. But, a total of $30,000 for a fight for a guy that's starting in the UFC is a pretty cheap price for somebody that wants to fix it. Just go up to this fighter. Like a lot of fighters have come out and said, these people are trying to pay me $70,000 to throw this fight and take a dive. And they're going to make it right back just betting on it. Just bet any more than $30,000 or $70,000, you're going to make it back. So it's really concerning, I guess, for a lot of reasons. I did want to kind of talk a little bit about the origins, because and where I think it comes from is because it's really, really easy for anybody with a decent amount of money to just come up to these fighters and tell them to throw it. You're that $30,000 is not going in your pocket. You have a whole camp. You have, equipment, gym fees, coach fees. There's every single bit of that, win bonus that you get is going straight back to your team and your gym. So as a fighter, you're really desperate. Some guys, take it differently because they're, in other countries and, the dollar goes a lot further there. But here in the United States, for example, $15,000 doesn't go very long as far as the salary goes. So you are in a desperate position. You want to make it big. You're in the UFC. You think you expect more. And then you start getting people out of nowhere, hey, give me money. I'll give you money if you throw this fight. Hey, I'm making a lot more money if I just take a dive and lose this fight than I am if I win this fight and knock them out and get, every single bonus possible. So it makes sense how it happens. As far as how big of a problem it is, I personally think it's a massive problem. This morning I woke up and I sold any stock that I had in TKO Holdings, because I think this is gonna blow the top off of it. For you have older fighters, newer fighters coming out on Instagram and Twitter saying, hey, I was offered this too. Nobody reported it because who knows what's going to happen if you do report it, and who knows how powerful these people offering money are. But if everything that is alleged is true, this is a massive hit for the UFC, not only for the legitimacy of the fights, but the legitimacy of the sport in general. And I think we're going to have a lot more than just a slap on the wrist if things come out that the UFC was aware of it. Dana White's not doing anything about it. And even if both those things are false, if you have fighters individually accepting money, I think it's going to be a massive problem regardless for the UFC.
Yeah, I agree, Son. And before Luke or Ryan, you go on, I want to say one thing. Dana White did come out and he did say that as soon as the fight happened, because they were alerted prior to the fight, they allowed the fight to go on because Dolgarian said he was going to fuck up the Cuban problem. Dana White did say as soon as that fight ended, they went in the back and called the FBI. So I do not think that there was any ill intent there on the UFC's behalf, but I just felt like I should get that out there. But Luke,
Yeah,
over
but
to you.
also, I mean, you guys have played Among Us. Like, self-report's a fucking thing. You know, when you're caught with your hands up, you're gonna call the cops and say, "Hey, there's somebody robbing
Yeah,
my house." Turns out you
Dana
just,
White
lost your car keys, whatever.
Dana White has been on the record a lot saying like, if you throw fights, we're going to be the ones that will fuck you. So I just don't see that happening. I mean, the guy's a businessman. Like, I don't.
Of
That
course.
just seems a bit ridiculous. But I don't know, Luke. I don't know if you want to take this one from here.
Yeah, I agree with everything San said. I think for the UFC individually, it really comes down to the fighter pay. Like you said, if you're offering someone 70 grand when they're making 30, subtracting whatever the fees are, probably after taxes, taking home less than 15, you're gonna entertain that idea, especially if you're cutting teeth to, survive or not be homeless. But I think it's a bigger issue in all of sports. Like we think about obviously you've had baseball, you've always had it with the Pete Rose and then like the Shoeless Joe and the White Sox back in the day, like early 90s. But since, the legalization of sports betting and the wide range accessibility, we're seeing it all the time. We just saw it with Otani. Michael Porter Jr.'s brother was betting against himself and telling his Discord to bet against himself for basketball. Like, this is not going away anytime soon. There's so much more money in sports. This is going to be a problem. And I don't know if there's a very clear cut way to stop this. I think we're going to see it across professional sports for years to come. Obviously, the basketball thing that came out a couple weeks ago is more poker related, but still some wrongdoings there. I think it definitely comes down, like what San says, the fighters pay, because obviously everyone does want to win in their heart. That's why they got into this sport. So in an ideal world, hopefully for the UFC's sake, when they move over to this new deal, the fighter pay goes up and we see less of it. But we had it happen in 2022 with James Cross. We just had it happen last week, and we're probably gonna see it again. So yeah, Son, like you said, this is bad for the company overall. Hopefully we get more information in the coming weeks, but yeah, this is just a bad all around.
Yeah, and I like how you touched on like the other sports, Luke. Terry Rozier is the other one who was just caught,
Yep.
like what's it called, forcing unders on his player props. So he's never going to play in the NBA again. He was doing it, and you think about it, the guy's total earnings in the NBA were 160 million at the time he did it. He was making 320K a game, and he did it for a commission of $200,000. So it's like fighter pays involved, absolutely, but I think what you touched on is where sports betting has now engulfed every single sports league in the United States and abroad. In terms of soccer, and those European leagues. You can't go more than 20 seconds watching an NFL game or even a UFC fight without seeing an ad for FanDuel or DraftKings, every other commercial break. I mean, they still have guys, when you watch the Contender Series, they have that guys like Yanni the Greek. He comes out and just, spoon feeds people parlays and over and under props. So it's something that I think needs to be eliminated from the sport entirely. If you want to distance yourself, like they have to distance themselves from gambling. The other big thing, that people are coming out with is all the clips of fighters. Randy Brown's one of them. He's fighting this week, is where they'll win their fight. They'll get on the post-fight press conference and be like, shout out to Steak, shout out Steak Sportsbook, and shout out this guy Skinny Bets. Which,
Yeah, who is that guy?
No idea. But like, as a fighter, I think the UFC, I know like you can't bet on your own fights, but you probably shouldn't be allowed to be sponsored by sports books either. It just seems like it's a pretty big conflict of interest there, especially when they're all shouting out this one specific dude. Like, who knows, he might be giving them off the top for letting their bets hit, something like that. It raises eyebrows all around. And that's pretty much like all I have to say on it. More will come out. In terms of what Dana White and the UFC do about it, it's hard to say, right? Because if it is a scandal that goes above and beyond and UFC does know about it, we might never know about it, because you have to remember, like, Dana White's very good friends with Cash Patel. He goes to a bunch of UFC fights. Like, if that goes all the way to the top, we might never know.
That's a good point.
I just have such a hard time believing that it would go that high up, to be completely honest. Like, I'm super skeptical, and I think you touched on a very good point that even in the NBA, like Terry Rozier, you touched on his career earnings and how much he was doing it for. And so you're saying corruption will always be there, essentially. Like they will always find a way. And I 100% agree there. But this is even worse because now these guys are so much more easily manipulated. So think about, like, this has happened before in a lot of fights that we just don't know about. If it's happened countless times, like you can count a numerous amount of times that it's happened in other sports, like in the NBA, and they make so much more money. There's no way on earth there hasn't been so much more corruption and thrown fights and shit that have happened in MMA if you just like think about it logically there.
Well, yeah,
So,
no, absolutely. I mean, dude, it calls into question like a ton of fucking fights, and it goes beyond fighters. I mean, it goes to, you know, the way some judges ref. You saw Dan Miragliotta in the Nelson Frivola fight where Frivola looked like he tapped and that the fight was over, and he called the fight, or he pulled Nelson off of him with 3 seconds left in the round. And you thought the fight was over, and then, you know, it goes and it's just sketchy reffing, and it goes on for the next 2 rounds. And then it gets down to judges and like these crazy scorecards that you see. And it transcends the fighters. I mean, this could be a huge problem in terms of every single aspect of an MMA fight, depending on who's reffing it, who's judging it, the whole nine.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
Ryan, I'm sorry. I just thought this was going to be a very good segue talking about the reffing and the judging going into the co-main event between Ante Delija and Waldo Cortez Acosta, because that was handled probably right in hindsight. But Son, I don't know if you want to jump in before we move on to that, but
no, I mean, like talking about fighters, you know, throwing fights. I mean, I didn't know Charles Oliveira was that desperate for money, man. I knew he should have won that Topuria fight. Like it's crazy how fucking high up these guys go for it.
I saw someone say like Cyril Gahn versus John Jones, but I was like,
yeah,
I don't know. If you become the champ,
yeah.
if you become the champ, you'll make so much more money than throwing a fight. So,
yeah,
like,
no, 100%. I mean, Charles Oliveira, obviously that was a joke. He's made $1 million
I know.
worth of fight bonuses, but yeah, I did want to mention. I mean, because we've talked about other sports and then just kind of joining that with the fighter pay and then the other sports pay. I mean, Calvin Ridley, that's a guy that's, you know, getting paid millions, and he got caught betting. And then all the other guys that you guys mentioned, you know, Otani, whatever. These are guys that are getting paid millions and sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars throughout the course of their careers, and they're still going for it. They're still doing these betting scandals. Imagine guys that are, you know, getting by the skin of their teeth, barely making, you know, minimum wage money in their fights per year. Like, it's literally easy pickings unless these guys are absolutely sure that they can, you know, win a title fight. You know, they're going to go for that money. And it's crazy to think that, you know, maybe a lot of these up and coming guys and a lot of these guys coming into the league are actually compromised. It's scary
I
to
will
think
say it is probably a very slim percentage of fighters that have taken falls. Like it is going to be a very slim percentage if we are being serious here, but anyone that happens just does have pretty serious consequences, especially when people are wagering money on it and how much you go and you promote the gambling and whatnot. So you're literally just fucking robbing from people.
Yeah, I mean, one
really
is too much,
so,
you know?
Yeah,
one is one
exactly. But kind of moving on from there. But yeah, that's really the point I was making there, Son, is that if the guys making millions of dollars are doing it, it's going to be worse on this level here. But kind of moving on, just talking about the inconsistencies, and you move on to the co-main event there. Waldo Cortez Acosta gets poked in the eye clearly, and I just wanted to point out, not a point was not taken when that happened. So clearly, nothing was learned from what happened the week prior with Tom Aspinall getting poked in the eye, because they didn't even deduct a point. Like, are we fucking serious? Waldo Cortez Acosta, if he didn't find that finish there, he was fucked. His eye's still fucked. He wouldn't have been able to see. He's fighting with one eye. You don't even deduct a point. So it's like, what's going on there? And then also how it was handled, where they let the coaches come into the octagon for Waldo Cortez Acosta, and he's able to sit down on the stool. That's not supposed to be allowed either. You're supposed to sit. You're supposed to have to stand up in your corner by yourself, essentially, for 5 minutes. So that's mishandled there as well. That's not how you're supposed to handle it. So just the fact that they're fucking shit up every single week, like something's going wrong. Like, get your shit together, man. You guys are $1 billion business. $7.7 billion is the deal you just signed. Figure your shit out, because this is just getting annoying. I don't know, Luke, if you have something you want to add there, but just kind of a bizarre sequence all around.
No, it has to do with the words eluding me right now, but the commissions that that sanction the fights. Like that's my biggest thing with the UFC, especially Dana White has alluded to it. Like if you're in every different state has a different commission, every country has its own commission, you're never going to get consistency across the board in judging and how they treat fights. Obviously, we have the same referees, but the judges are picked differently, the commissions are picked differently, the rules are different everywhere. So I think with that always playing a role in combat sports, you're always going to have these inconsistencies like we're talking about right now.
Very good point. Very good point. So let's spin this forward over to this upcoming card, UFC Vegas 111. And we're going to kick this off with a friend of the pod here, Max Jimenez, who is coming in as a plus 300 dog, opposing Josh Hokett, who is coming off a win in the Dana White Contender Series. Decent matchup here. We have two heavyweight prospects that were both viewed very highly by a lot of promotions. They were both highly touted here. Hokett is a former NCAA All-American 2 times, and then was on an NFL roster, crazy athlete there, always looking to pressure forward, always going for the takedowns. On the flip side of that, Max Jimenez has some of the best BJJ that there is. He's jiu-jitsu black belt. I believe he was a no-gi runner-up or placed third. So very, very high-level BJJ. San, I think it's only fitting for you to kick this one off for us. How do you see Max get the job done?
Man, there are a few ways. I mean, I think he can finish the fight, and I think he can also get the decision. I think it's very probable any of those three, methods of victory are extremely possible for him. You see fights like, a Tapuria, he's going to win by knockout. This is a fight that I can see going either way. And I think Max can take it regardless of which direction it goes. Knockout, obviously he has more knockouts than he has submissions in his MMA career, which is very, impressive. And speaking of impressive, I'm impressed with the line. Plus 300 is crazy. But at the same time, you get a guy that just fought in Dana White Contender Series against, a pretty decent competition. And then a guy that's fighting at the Shogun promotion, which is a good promotion. It's a very solid promotion, but it doesn't really rank up to, the guys that are coming in Dana White Contender Series and having, LFA and things like that, that Josh Hokett does. So I think it's extremely favorable on our side here because, I'm going Max Jimenez. I'm sure the whole entire, panel here is going Max Jimenez. But I think it's going to be about the way that he gets it done. And I think he's very capable on the submission, obviously, because of his BJJ. But when we interviewed him, he did say he's not really a guy that goes for finishes in BJJ. Even in jiu-jitsu competitions, he's saying he's going for points, he's going for control, he's going for all this stuff, and not just trying to choke somebody out. Although he said at any moment he could just fall into it. So I think, in my eyes, it'll probably end with a submission on Max's side, because Josh Hokett's a guy that likes to go for those takedowns. He's pretty quick too with it. And if Max gets uncomfortable, and even if he gets uncomfortable on the feet, I think he's going to just default to what he knows and default to, go back to, his program settings, which is going to be those submission attempts and just being able to control this guy on the ground. Because if we're being serious, Josh Hokett's wrestling is very good. But I just don't think that, really translates to finishing the fight on the ground, unless you got some serious ground and pound on you. So I got Max Jimenez by submission here. First UFC fight, he's going to show off that BJJ belt, and we'll see. Maybe he strings a few together, and we'll see where he's at in the end of next year.
Yeah, I got nothing much to add. Obviously, I wasn't on that interview, but there's just something that is going on, especially with the bigger guys, the guys that are really good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu too, especially against a wrestler. I'm feeling a heel hook. I know we were looking at it and you're talking about the knockouts and his knockout power. But like you said, sometimes when a really aggressive wrestler, you find yourself in opportunities that you're normally not presented with. And with Max's repertoire in Jiu-Jitsu, I think he could find himself a Walter Walker type highlight here. And I'm looking forward to this fight. This is a great line, like you said. Take it submission, plus 300 just to win. It's going to be, I don't know, we didn't look at the odds, but it's going to be upwards of plus 700 probably for sub. So that's some good value right there. I'm taking Max by sub.
Yeah, obviously got to go with the friend of the pod here. Hokett will try to get this to the ground. I think that does benefit Max because, jiu-jitsu guy on his back, it's where he's most comfortable. And if he's going to be there, where he's most comfortable, especially at the beginning of the fight when he's not, when everyone's dry, I could definitely see him hitting some jiu-jitsu sweeps, locking something up, showing Hokit something he's never seen before. And in terms of the KOs, coincidentally enough, it's when Jimenez is on top, he does throw pretty aggressive ground and pound. That's something I've noticed from his fights, which is something to be on the lookout for. So if he can get those jiu-jitsu sweeps, he might not necessarily go for the sub, but he might just start throwing shots, elbows here and there, trying to get the fight out of there. So strong finishing potential on both sides. Hokit's no slouch by any means. This guy was a pretty highly touted prospect, very athletic, had a stint in the NFL, was an American college collegiate wrestler. So like no slouch by any means, but got to go with the friend of the pod here. Hopefully gets it done by finish, but plus 300 is pretty juicy in itself. So be on the lookout.
Yeah, funny enough, I actually reached out to one of my buddies, Pat Dana MMA. He's over at like Cage Side Press, puts out some good stuff. So if anyone listening wants to check him out, make sure you do. But I asked him about this matchup between Max Jimenez and Josh Hokit, and he's like, oh man, Josh Hokit's a friend of mine, so I can't say too much. But he's like, so I'm biased essentially, but he's like, it's funny that you say that though, because going into this year, I looked at both Max Jimenez and Josh Hokit as two of the best heavyweight prospects there are available. Like they're both high up on my radar. So funny enough, they get matched up together here, both making their UFC debuts. I think the UFC, it's interesting matchmaking because you have a lot of weak heavyweights. You have a lot of cans at heavyweight. And I think both these guys could be up in the rankings very quickly, like easily. So to match them up here, it's almost like they're seeing which one is potentially going to be their guy, because I do think both guys here can be legit. And what I'm curious to see is because I do believe Josh Hokit will go for the takedown. We all touched on that. Every single one of Hokit's fights, he goes for the takedown almost immediately. That's what he does. He's a good wrestler. He does have good control. He does have good ground and pound too. Like he is always looking to advance position and he's always looking for a finish. But if he takes Max down, which if he does shoot on Max, he probably will. I don't think he'll be able to pass his guard and really even be able to throw like heavy ground and pound. I really don't see him passing his guard. I see him just getting stuck in Max's guard. Max maybe finding a sweep like you touched on, Ryan. And I see him having a lot of success there. Like you watch Hokit's fights and he'll be fighting some can who like clearly isn't a high level BJJ black belt. And he's able to just wheel around him, just position around him, pass their guards, jump over, heavy ground and pound, posture up, do whatever he wants, get the back. That's not against a guy this experienced grappling. So I'm curious to see what that looks like on the ground. I 100% here am going Max Jimenez. I think he will find the sub. I think Hokit's going to be a little bit surprised. He's never faced anyone with this level of grappling. I think he might get himself caught in something, maybe a little quick panic tap. I don't know. But I see Max having success there on the ground and getting him out of there. And there's a chance round one, Hokit goes for a takedown. Max threatens a few submissions. Hokit's on top. And then rounds 2 and 3, you just see Josh Hokit be like, all right, I'm just going to strike now. I don't want to go back on the ground there. And you just see like a stand-up fight rounds 2 and 3. Like I could see that happening as well. I just don't think playing that wrestling game with Max Jimenez for 15 minutes is going to be a great idea. So 100% on Max here. Got the sub. Son?
Yeah, I did just want to touch on before we moved on, because we have talked about it a few times. I think it's worth noting on Tapology and on a lot of these MMA websites, I'm seeing Max listed as a 6 foot tall heavyweight. And I know this dude personally. Like I've seen this dude in real life. And when I saw him for the first time, granted, I was like, 16, 17 years old, working at a fucking retail store at the mall. This dude is massive, dude. Like massive. Like, like when you're on a PowerPoint and you grab the corner of a picture and you drag it and it just gets taller and wider. That's what God did to this man. Like he's like huge, dude. He's like minimum like 6'3", 6'4". Like I think this dude is massive. Like we'll see, because Josh Hokit's like 6 foot, 6'1". So there's going to be a huge size difference there. And I think that's going to be a massive player on that ground game, especially passing guard, like you said, Zach. But yeah, that's all I got, man.
Yeah, let's spin this one forward. Starting off the main card here, we have Christian Leroy Duncan, CLD, coming in at plus 160 against Marco Tulio. This is a super solid middleweight matchup here. Tulio 2-0 in the UFC since receiving his contract. Following a win on the Dana White Contender Series, takes a big step up in competition here against the vet in CLD. Luke, I'll let you kick this one off for us. Which one of these gentlemen do you see prevailing come Saturday nights?
Yeah, I'm going Tulio here. I think this is, like you said, a tough matchup, a good matchup by the matchmakers. But I think, Leroy Duncan, he's got the athletic build. He's a very athletic guy. You see him bounce around in the cage. But with that being said, you see that fade towards the end of fights. I just have Tulio as the more pressure fighter. I think he's a little grittier in there. And what really spun it for me and maybe go Tulio's way is this fight's in the apex. I think when you have a fight in the apex, a little bit of a smaller octagon, you have the ability to corner your guy, getting some clinches against the fence. And I think that's going to play in Tulio's favor. I think this is a clear-cut, grinded out win, and he's going to get his hands raised at the decision. So I'm going Tulio by UD.
Yeah, I'm I'm going the opposite here. I've always been a fan of Christian Leroy Duncan, just in terms of the striking. He mixes it up, he throws some wild shit, and I always respect that out of fighters. I guess the difference that separates him is he's, 9 wins by knockout, a good amount of them in the UFC. He seems to be able to find the chin, especially he's a pretty decent counterpuncher. So I think if Tulio is going to back him up against the fence, and try to put the pressure on him, I think he can find a couple counter shots in there to at least hurt Tulio and, land the more impressive shots in the round. But, this is a fight in Vegas, like you mentioned. Damage-based scoring trumps there. They see the most amount of fights a year. The judges pretty solid on that side of the fence. And unless this goes to the ground, if Tulio ends up mixing up and taking to the ground, that's where I see Christian Leroy Duncan having some problems. But I think this fight will stay standing. And I think Christian Leroy Duncan with the veteranship and, UFC fight experience, being only 30 years old as well. He's not old by any means necessary. He's pretty much hitting his prime right now. I think you'll be able to counter some shots there and maybe put Tulio away.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much had the same analysis as both of you guys. I mean, obviously, if it stays on the ground, I think CLD is obviously extremely capable on the standing up on that canvas, and I can see him use his size advantage to Marco Tulio, to his advantage and being able to just ride this fight out into decision. With that said, I'm not a guy that likes to watch decision fights. Unless you're, a guy that is extremely exciting like Merab to watch fight. At least to me, he's exciting to watch. And so I'm going Marco Tulio here. He's strung together a few KOs in a row. And I remember calling CLD's last fight, and I was on Eric Anders because I just wasn't extremely impressed with CLD's ability or his resume in the UFC, albeit he's been in the UFC since 2023, and he's obviously had a very decent career for himself. Losing a guy like Petrosian and then losing, to a guy like Gregory Rodriguez is not bad on your record at all. I just think that shows kind of the level cap that he's at right now. And I think Ricky Tulio is just able to surpass the level that Christian Leroy Duncan is on right now. So I'm going Marco Tulio here, hoping for a knockout. Both these guys obviously are coming off knockout wins here. Both very exciting guys. I would love to see one of these guys get put out. I don't really care who wins this fight. But yeah, I'm going Marco Tulio here. I like what I've seen from him recently.
Yeah, I'm also going to go with Marco Tulio here as the favorite. I was a little surprised that he's a minus 190 favorite there. I thought this would be about a toss-up, but Marco Tulio can crack the shoot box fighter. I'm a big fan of shoot box there and Diego Lima. So fuck yeah, Marco Tulio, fun fighter. He can crack, he can grapple, he can kind of do it all. Both guys are pretty well rounded actually. So should be a fun one here, but yeah, I'm signing with Marco Tulio. And now moving on, we have Ricky Simon. Luke, your boy, Ricky Simon, minus 175 favorite, taking on Raoni Barcelos at plus 145. Who's on a 3-fight win streak now? Yeah. Ricky Simon versus Raoni Barcelos, second fight of the main card. And
my order is so confused.
At least it's what I saw earlier. I don't know if that's
you're right.
mixed up now, but
no, you might be right. I got Chris Padilla versus Bonfim next, but more than likely that I'm wrong. But
it's going to be Simon Barcelos. So Ricky Simon minus 175 taking on Raoni Barcelos at plus 145. Raoni Barcelos on a 3-fight win streak, coming off wins over Christian Quiones, Peyton Talbot, and Cody Garbrandt. Simon, on the other hand, is riding a 2-fight win streak himself. Luke, I think you're the one who's the most prepared for this, so we'll let you kick this one off again.
Yeah, like you kind of alluded on to right there, Barcelos has reinvigorated his career. I mean, an older gentleman in the UFC, was on a 2-fight skid. Then he gets one done, and then he fights the up-and-coming Peyton Talbot. And I think we were all on Talbot in that fight. We thought Talbot was going to fly to the top of the rankings and get a title fight within 5 years. And Barcelos really showed his veteranship in that fight. He's got a good punch. He's a good grappler, good wrestler. But I think you just run into a brick shit house in Ricky Simon. Like you said before, I'm a fan of Ricky Simon. And I think if you like mixed martial arts, you're a fan of Ricky Simon, the way he fights. He's got kind of that Mexican style boxing, good boxing, chin that, has been tested time and time again and seems to always be there at the end of the fights. And I think what the biggest thing for me is he also has great wrestling, great defensive wrestling. We don't really see him get taken down that much. And when he does, he's always battling for position and ending up, in the more offensive position. I think this is a great fight for Ricky Simon to get a third win in a row. I think he's just going to be a little bit too much to handle for the older gentleman. And people forget Ricky Simon, I feel like, is considered a vet, which he is. He's been in the UFC for a while, but he's only 33. He's still very young. Like we talked about, you normally hit your stride 28 to 31, 32. So he's still right outside of that. Still fighting at an extremely high level. I think he gets this done here. I think he puts on a masterclass of a performance, but I don't see him getting the finish. I think it goes to decision. I got Ricky Simon by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Luke. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I mean, not really much to add. Ricky Simon's an extremely exciting guy, and he's really hitting his stride. He's had a few submission wins, which does, kind of worry me a little bit, but he's not plateauing in any sense. Cameron Smotherman, that's a guy that you should be able to finish, but you obviously aren't going to be able to get a finish every single fight. And he's had a very good career in the UFC until now, fighting guys like Vinicius Oliveira, fighting guys like Mario Bautista, taking both of them to decision. So just an extremely competitive guy. And I think that experience and that how recent that experience was, obviously both of those losses age extremely well, given who those guys are fighting right now. So I'm also on Ricky Simon. I'm hoping for a masterclass. I love Barcelos. I think he's great. But yeah, I just think Ricky Simon might be coming out of those gates a little bit too hot for him.
Yeah, not to beat a dead horse here, but I'm going with Ricky Simon in this one. I mean, Raoni Barcelos is a very good fighter. The only thing though, it's heavily utilized based on wrestling, grappling, control time. Where he's looking for the sub, not too much to speak of on the feet. Meanwhile, on the other end, you have a vet in Ricky Simon who's seen it all. Went 5 rounds of Song Yadong before he was able to catch him on the chin. Very impressive. And then he comes back, gets on a 3-fight loss streak, comes back in February of this year. Massive underdog against Javid Basharat, a really big up-and-coming prospect in the UFC. We talk about the Basharat bros, and just absolutely floors him and puts his lights out. One of the more impressive KOs I've seen this year, when you have to compare it to like a spinning wheelhouse kick from Ruffy and things like that, it's not going to be anywhere near like the KO of the year contender, but definitely very shocking, especially in the manner in which he did it. And, being such a massive underdog in that fight as well. I think he was coming at like plus 300, plus 400, expected to lose. Now he's put together a little bit of a win streak. And I just think he'll be able to neutralize the grappling of Barcelos, which is what he relies on the most in these fights. Very good wrestling defense. And I have him souping this up by a decision.
I'll throw a random poll here, but Ricky Simon, pretty positive, is teammates with Sariq Shields, who I interviewed on this podcast, PFL fighter, over at American Top Team Portland. So just throwing that out there, a little connection that I just kind of put together. But my kind of thing, again, like you touched on, Ryan, I don't really want to beat a dead horse here, but I do think Raoni Barcelos, like 3-fight win streak here, is a little sketchy, because like Christian Keown is pretty positive he just got cut. So that's someone who's not on the roster. And then you have Talbot, who had like the whole like sickness thing in his grappling. He's got exposed like young prospect.
Look, I don't know what's going on, but I don't want to cut you off there, but I hate that narrative. I mean, like it's coming up in the his Cejudo fight, and Talbot specifically said he got vertigo in the 3rd round, so it wasn't affecting.
Yeah, okay. Like, clear that up. So he just exposed a guy who couldn't grapple at that point. So that's just a veteran move, fighting the young prospect with a huge hole in his game, expose it. That's not going to happen to Ricky Simon here. And then the 3rd win is Cody Garbrandt, who, like, let's be real. I mean, Cody Garbrandt was a plus 250 underdog going into that fight against old ass Raoni Barcelos. Like, hats off to Raoni Barcelos. But if you really like look at the 3-fight win streak, I think the names sound a lot better than being able to kind of string together those wins. But still did it. Hats off to him at his age. Very impressive. But I just don't see him being able to win in the ways in which he did against those other guys, against a guy like Ricky Simon here. So with all that being said, and along with everything that you guys said, I'm going to go with Ricky Simon here, and we can move on there. -175 I think is actually a pretty good line for Ricky Simon too. Like, not even a 2-1 favorite. I like that line. But moving on, we have Chris Padilla taking on Ismail Bonfim. Padilla +170, Bonfim -210, and what figures to be a pretty close lightweight matchup here. Bonfim 2-2 since entering the UFC, has faced the better of the competition with his 2 losses coming to Nazim Sadikov and Benoit Saint Denis. Padilla 3-0 in the UFC thus far, coming off a split decision win over Jai Herbert. San, do you think Bonfim's experience to get that against that upper level competition will be enough to kind of get him through this matchup here with I don't know why I just completely
Chris
fucking
Padilla.
blanked on the name with Chris
Tortilla. Yeah, we discussed this fight a little bit before we started filming. I think he will be able to. I'm actually still making up my mind right now. I'm kind of looking through their last few fights. Obviously, it's very tough to bet against a guy that's on a 2-fight, UFC win streak, and before that, he's on a 6-fight win streak since 2023. It's kind of tough to bet against a guy like that. That's kind of just on a roll. Although Bonfim just seems like the guy that's been able to fight the better guys and just get those losses out of the way. Obviously, a rear naked choke, getting and then getting doctor stoppage against Sadikov, just 2, tough ways to lose a fight in round 1. But he did beat Terrence McKinney, which is pretty impressive by knockout too. And I think that kind of speaks to the levels of his capabilities. But then you get him in the octagon with guys that are just that good. BSD back in 2023 was an absolute demon. Everybody was terrified of him. I think we forget that. BSD was the boogeyman of that division. He's this French, special forces guy that just is an unreal fighter. And that was who he was back in 2023. Still a killer, but just not at that level. And then Nazim Sadikov, putting on some of the best fights that we've seen this year. So just aging very well. And I think Ismail Bonfim deserves to get a win here. I think the line's right. It's going to be a close fight, but I think he should be able to have enough to get it done. Maybe on the feet, maybe on the ground. But I do see a finish going his way.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way. I agree with everything on Bonfim. I think people forget that he's very significantly different than his brother in styles of fights. He's got more of a kickboxing striking style, while his brother's, which we'll get to it later, but is heavily a grappler, and that's where he, hangs his hat. My thing with Taco Padilla is just, I feel like he's just a dog, man. Like, I feel like he's one of those guys, especially, I know I said this before, but small apex cage. You get a guy who's got nonstop pressure, who has really good striking defense. He doesn't really get hit clean a lot. And like you said, he's riding that win streak. I think no pressure's on him. I think this is very much a Bonfim card, which we see a lot when the brothers always fight in the same cards. But I think that loss recently is definitely weighing on him. He feels the pressure of having to get back in the win column, especially with his brother fighting as well as he is. I'm going Taco here. I think he's going to grind out a win. What makes me nervous is, like you touched on, the Vegas judges normally do love damage, and I think maybe the eye test won't be accurate because it might seem like Bonfim's hitting more, but I think the defense, and I think Taco's got a little bit better of a takedown attack. I think he could ride out and grind out a victory here. So I'm going the underdog, going against Yusan. I know we're still probably pretty close in the record, so this will be one that puts us apart right here.
Yeah, sure will. You'll be dropping, bud.
Yeah, Luke, I'm pretty much right there with you. Honestly, like, I was very hype on both the Bonfim brothers when they both fought in the Contender Series in the same season, both having very impressive wins. But it's the losses and the way he's been losing to some of these upper echelon guys. Chris Padilla has yet to prove himself. We will see come Saturday night if he starts rising those ranks and is that prospect that, he could be riding a 3-fight win streak in the UFC. But, like, it was just like he looked bad against Benoit Saint Denis. Absolute killer, obviously, and then Benoit kind of skidded off in 2024. 2025 is kind of now making a resurgence again. And with that Sadikov doctor stoppage, I could be getting this completely wrong, but I'm like damn near positive. It was like that came from a head kick. Sadikov kicked him in the head, and then he went back to his corner after round 1 and was like, I can't see. Just a very weird doctor stoppage overall. And it's just when you see him fight these guys who might be, just like pretty tough tests, he hasn't proven himself yet. So I do love Padilla at a plus 170 underdog, a guy who's riding a 3-fight win streak, all the highs, has a sub, has a KO, grinded out a decision with Jai Herbert, who has a ridiculous reach, very tall for the division. You remember, this is the guy that head kicked and almost put out Taporia when he was on the come up, just because he's such a difficult guy to game plan for, because there's not many like him at the lightweight division in terms of having like a 79, 80-inch reach, and just being very lengthy. And then Padilla on this side is coming in with the 3-inch reach advantage, and a bunch of other stuff. No slouch on the ground. Might be able to take the fight there if he needs it to. And I think he gets a pretty comfortable decision as an underdog come Saturday night.
Yeah, this was kind of a tough one for me to handicap a little bit because I can't really get the best read on Chris Padilla, in all honesty. Like that split decision win against Jai Herbert, I wasn't really overly impressed with Padilla. Bonfim's a little tough as well because he fights at upper level of competition. There's something you touched on, Luke, and loses. And then he goes and he doesn't really have any wins over impressive guys or like good guys at all. So I guess it's kind of hard to gauge exactly where Bonfim's at, but I will say like Nazim Sadikov, I think is an absolute killer. Like I think that guy will be a top 10 lightweight. Like I think he is fucking legit. I think his striking is legit and he's very fun to watch. That loss has aged extremely well. Sadikov's a fucking killer. BSD still is a fucking killer too. Like if he fought Moicano right now, I that fight could go differently, and Moicano fucked him up. So I don't know, it just seems weird. Like I still do think BSD is a killer. Those are two high level guys. I'm going to side with Bonfim, given just who he's been in there with, that high level competition, that experience in the octagon there, paired with also being in camp with his brother. I think that could probably help bring out the best in you, seeing what he's doing, main eventing. Like you got to go out there, get the job done, make the Familia proud. Give me Ismail Bonfim, and let's move on. Next up, we in the welterweight division, we have the powerful 41-year-old Muslim Salikov taking on Uros Medic, who is 1-1 in 25, does have a loss via way of knockout, by the way, also in 2025. Salikov, who is aged like fine wine, is coming off a pair of knockout wins, with the last one of which being against Carlos Leal as a pretty sizable underdog. Ryan, do you see the underdog Salikov picking up another knockout win here?
Yeah, I do. I'm going with another underdog on this card. Sadikov is like ridiculous to watch because he just doesn't look like he should be able to throw the things he throws, and then you get spinning wheelhouse kick against Song Kanan out of nowhere, round one. Fights Carlos Leal, puts him out, and Carlos Leal is a pretty highly rated prospect coming into the UFC. Had a split decision loss with Renat Fakhretdinov in his first fight in the UFC, which people thought he won, especially coming off of a couple days' notice. People were really hype on the guy, and Sadikov just put him away. Like it was absolutely nothing. And on the flip side, you have Uros Medic, where it's sort of like he's a great fighter, but the chin isn't necessarily built for fighting, if that makes sense. And I think it's going to get tested early. That's what Muslim Salikov's known for, and I think he's gonna find the chin of Uros Medic in round one and put him out there pretty much immediately within this fight. I have this one by round one KO.
Yeah, Ryan, that's where my mind was at initially. And I do want Muslim Salikov to win. I think it'd be awesome. He's 41. It's always good to see the older guys win. I'm just having a tough time committing to it. And I don't know if it's the odds that's getting to me or if it's just the fact that Uros Medic is kind of entering his prime right now. He's 32 years old, and he's also 6'1", as opposed to Salikov's what, 5'8", 5'9",
5'11".
5'11"?
Yeah.
Okay, I got him at 5.
Typology.
Okay. Yeah, I had him at 5'9", so I had him as a lot taller guy. Maybe it changes things a little bit, but I'm just going to stick with my gut here. I'm going Uros Medic. Ryan, I also have him winning by KO. I don't think either of these guys are walking out of that cage, at least with one of them not losing their consciousness. So I can all but guarantee this one won't go the distance. Whereas whether it's Uros Medic or Muslim Salikov, but I'm just going to err on the side of the younger guy that's coming off a knockout win in round one against a pretty decent Gilbert Urbina. And yeah, I mean, you give me a guy that's 32 with knockout power and a guy that's 41 with knockout power. I'm just going to take the guy that likely has a little bit more speed.
Wait, let's not call Gilbert
Yeah.
Abrina decent here. He's fucking awful. Sorry, I just wanted to
Okay,
say that.
I'm just saying I was
Dude,
just
he's
saying
like-
decent as in like he's a fighter that's got a heartbeat, right?
7-3.
I don't know.
1-4 in the UFC with 4 losses by finish, and one of which being to Trayshawn Gore. But
Yeah, doesn't age well, but still, I mean, the point being that Eurosmedich has that knockout power, and he's able to put anybody out. When he finds that shot. So
100%.
I'm going with his speed, and I'm going with his youth. Hopefully, being able to withstand whatever Salikov brings his way.
Yeah, I agree with like everything both of you guys said. I think Son, you hit it on Medic, quicker, younger, has the knockout power as well. Ryan Salikov has looked great over his last 3 fights. Like you said, Zach, aging like fine wine. I think this is clear a fight that under 1.5 rounds, if it finishes, it's going to be Salikov. Over 1.5 rounds, it's Medic. That's how I'm viewing it. It's hard. This is one I did not pick in my notes. I am going Salikov just because of how good he's looked over the last 3 fights. But I see this one going anyway. It's so weird because obviously Medic is the favorite. Tapologies, how they do the community picks, has 78% on Salikov. So it's like the public is completely split on this one. I think it's going to be a good fight. And like you said, one of the guys is not walking out, or he might walk out, but he's going to have a knockout loss on his repertoire or on his resume. So I'm going Salikov, but this is a tough one. I would stay away from this one betting.
Yeah, I think Salikov's a good story, and I do like Salikov to win by knockout. I think his power is pretty serious here. Uros Medic getting put out by Punahele Soriano also doesn't really sit too well with me. I think if Salikov is able to hit him, he will be able to put him out. So I'm going to go with Salikov here. I like the line as well at plus 140. I just don't think he should really be too much of an underdog here. So Salikov it is, but that's going to be a fun one, man. That should be a banger. Uros Medic is a finisher as well. So that's a fun fight. But moving on.
I just want to, just before we move on, I did want to say, I can't really use this as my reasoning, but something that just turns me off about the Salikov pick is that everybody's on him as far as, podcasts and every single, professional bettor that I've seen. And I just hate to see that. I don't know if it's like a Vegas curse, but anytime, I see a guy like Matty Betts, he's like, oh, this is my favorite underdog. I love this guy. Nothing against that guy. I love him. He's got great content, great picks and all that. But I don't know, when I just see the whole MMA world just, strongly backing one guy in a pretty much 50-50 fight, I just got to go the other way.
All right. And moving on, Matt Schnell, plus 270. Joseph Morales, minus 350. Little flyweight matchup here. The longtime vet, Matt Schnell, is coming off a sub win just a few months ago. Both guys here, primarily BJJ specialists. Luke, I'll let you kick this one off. How do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I'm going Morales. I think Morales is very good. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is his second stint in the UFC. I think earlier in his career, he's 31. Earlier in his career, he had a stint, and then he fought, I think, Cage Warriors and maybe another promotion, and now back in the UFC. I think he's just good all around. For Matt Schnell, I think it's hard because I was such a fan after the Samuja Dart. How do you pronounce that, Ryan? Yeah. That fight was crazy. One of the best fights I've ever seen live or watching on TV in live time. But then he went on and lost 3 straight UFC fights. And then he beat Jimmy Flick. I'm not really putting too much on the win against Jimmy Flick. I think Morales is just going to be better all around. I think he's going to be able to take this fight wherever he wants. Obviously, Matt Schnell's got the grappling, but Jimmy Flick was able to have some success getting him down in the earlier rounds. And I think Morales is much better than Jimmy Flick. Obviously, we don't do MMA math, but I think this one is just lining up perfectly for Morales. He's a younger guy, 31 years old, right in that prime age. I think he gets it done easy. I think he subs him.
Yeah, I think both these guys have styles that complement each other very well in terms of like the grappling, the BJJ experience. What swayed me more towards Joseph Morales is, even you touched on the Sumaderji fight and the fights after that for Matt Schnell. It's like at flyweight, I don't know if I've ever seen a flyweight fighter get rocked more. It seems like to be every single fight, like Matt Schnell finds himself in trouble. Obviously, Steve Erceg knocked him out with one punch, his counter left straight down the pipe. But even before that, the Sumaderji fight, which was sick, and it was a crazy comeback on Matt Schnell's part, when Sumudaerji had him rocked multiple times, and you're just thinking, holy shit, this chin's made of fucking, I don't even fucking know, like sponge. Like I'm blanking on soft materials here, but it just, like I said, it seems like every fight Schnell ends up getting wobbled, and even if that goes to the judges' scorecards, it's not a good look. If you're swaying back and forth and getting rocked, in between rounds, that can pretty much sway a close round in an instant. I just don't trust the chin to Matt Schnell. So I have to go Joseph Morales here, especially if this is going to stay standing. I think he'll land the harder shots, and I think Matt Schnell will wear him a lot worse than Joseph Morales will.
Yeah, I think this fight's pretty straightforward. I'm going with Joseph Morales here. I think he's just a better grappler. Obviously, throughout their professional careers, Matt Schnell's got 9 submission wins, and then Joseph Morales has 7. But what strikes me the most is that while Matt Schnell does have all those submission wins, he loses a lot by guillotine choke, and recently as well. In 2024, losing to Cody Durden, and then 2025 this year. In the beginning of the year, he left the UFC, not left the UFC, but he competed outside of the UFC in a BJJ match, and then got guillotined, which is a pretty, I didn't watch the fight. I don't know how it went, but just look at face value, guillotine choke as a BJJ, loss just doesn't really age well when you're going up against a guy that's as experienced and as dangerous on the ground as Joseph Morales. So I would not be surprised at all if Joseph Morales is able to, take him into those deep waters and submit him pretty early on in this fight.
Yeah, I like the story for Joseph Morales too, getting cut from the UFC, coming back on the Ultimate Fighter. Here he is winning that, back on the big stage. He clearly can grapple well. We've seen that. Striking's shirt up. We'll see how that goes. If this stays on its feet, I don't know if he'll throw. I don't know if he'll throw enough volume to really outpoint Matt. I don't know if Matt Schnell will do anything either. I think this fight could end up being very boring, but I also could see Joseph Morales down on the ground winning those grappling exchanges and finding a submission. So hopefully we do see a finish, but I could see a boring fight here. But I will side with Morales, the younger guy here. And now moving on to our main event, we have Gabriel Bonfim, the second Bonfim brother of the night, taking on Rude Boy Randy Brown. Bonfim, the slight favorite. Brown is coming off a round 2 KO win over Nicholas Dalby, who, funny enough, actually has a round 2 TKO win over Gabriel Bonfim. Bonfim, his last time out, had a very controversial split decision win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one in which I really do not think he won. Luke, I know we touched on that a bit earlier. Back on track here. San, are you siding with Rude Boy or Bonfim?
I'm going with Rude Boy, man. I think Randy Brown's awesome. Obviously, he's a little bit older, has a lot more experience as far as the fight game comes. And Gabriel Bonfim, he's great. He's a really good fighter. Don't get me wrong, but like you touched on it, and that's really what kind of set this off for me to go with the underdog here is that fight against Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson's at a point in his career where he's really, he was fighting a lot of prospects, a lot of up and coming guys, a lot of guys that are, he was kind of a gatekeeper for lack of words, and just not being able to capitalize on it and then losing essentially, in my eyes as well. I remember watching that fight. It just wasn't impressive at all. I just didn't really see what everybody had, seen in him. And, when you get a guy like Randy Brown that still has that crazy knockout power that we have seen so recently, I just don't think it stacks well with Bonfim. I just think it kind of everything is going against him right now. And that split decision was kind of, kind of left a bad taste in my mouth as far as, what I thought of Bonfim, of Ismail Bonfim, Gabriel Bonfim. So, I'm going with Randy Brown here. I think he's exciting. I think he's still got that crazy knockout power, and I think he'll be able to find it this weekend. And then not to say, he knocked out the guy that knocked out Bonfim. So, no MMA math there, but yeah, I think it just kind of speaks to the levels that these guys are at and where they're able to compete to.
Yeah, Son, excuse me. I like Zach touched on, we talked about this a little before we started filming. I think that Wonder Boy fight is very indicative of predicting this fight. Like you touched on, split decision, very close. I think we all were on Wonder Boy in that fight. And And I know he couldn't get it done, but Wonder Boy, I think, only has been submitted one time in UFC. I could be wrong, and it was Shavkat, who we know is a great submission artist. So that was something that was like, all right, it's not that big of a deal that Bonfim didn't get him out of there when he had the opportunities. But then, like you touched on, he kind of gasses towards the end of his fights. If he's not having his way, you kind of see it fade. And he has all right striking, but not anywhere compared to Randy Brown. On the flip side, Randy Brown definitely has a striking advantage, and he's not that much of a slouch on the ground. Obviously, this is not his bread and butter, but he has competed in exhibition jiu-jitsu matches. He does have an experience, obviously being a vet in the UFC, experienced on the ground. My thing is every round in a 5-round fight starts on the feet, and I think if Randy Brown can survive the beginning onslaught in round 1 and 2, the takedowns and submission attempts, I think he's going to cruise to a victory. I think when the stamina starts going here, Randy Brown's going to show his veteranship, and he's going to be able to just pick him apart from distance. He's obviously got a huge reach advantage, 78 inches to 72.5 inches. And I think Randy Brown's just kind of, I don't want to say a gatekeeper, but he's been at the top level where he'll lose a couple fights and then win a good fight against a formidable opponent. And like you said, he's just a dog, man. He has highlights. He's fun to watch in the octagon. The one fight that I kind of pinned to also that scared me on Randy Brown's side was the Bryan Battle fight, because Bryan Battle really just held him in the corner and didn't really do much. But I totally forgot Bryan Battle came in like 15 pounds overweight. I mean, that's a lot. That's not going to happen on Saturday night. They're both professionals. They're going to come in on weight, and I don't think that size advantage is going to play against Brown like it did in that Battle fight. I'm going Randy Brown. I think he knocks him out in the 3rd round. I think we're talking about what's next for Randy Brown come next week as he continues to knock off some of these prospects.
Yeah, Luke, I mean, I'm right there with both you guys. And I think the thing I was shocked about most in terms of seeing this fight was when I first saw the line. I actually couldn't believe that Randy Brown came in as such a sizable dog that he did. I think at like what, plus 175, like that. Because when you watch Gabriel Bonfim's last fight with Wonder Boy Thompson, and it going to a split decision in a fight that I thought Bonfim should have won very handily. If you're this highly touted prospect, that people point him out to be, 18-1, guy's a very good fighter, but Wonder Boy Thompson, on the feet was just dotting him up, kicking him. He had plenty of head kicks. Credit to Bonfim for eating a lot of those, but that fight was so close when it shouldn't have been, especially when you're fighting a 41-year-old Wonder Boy Thompson. And, if that fight goes differently, I think no one complains about it. I think a lot of people had Wonder Boy winning that fight. At least I know I did. My problem with this, though, is Randy Brown is just like, I don't see him losing. Like I actually don't see like a path where Randy Brown loses, and I just can't believe that he's an underdog in this fight. Like it's actually mind-boggling me. Like his only losses in the UFC are his notable losses: Jack Della Maddalena, current champ, fighting Islam in 10 days. And then Bryan Battle, a split decision loss that people thought he got robbed in, especially when Bryan Battle came in 15 pounds overweight. This guy looks good in every single fight. Nicholas Dalby has the grappling. He can do it. He lost a split decision to Renat Fakhretdinov in a fight where he out-grappled Renat Fakhretdinov and held him against the cage. And then Randy Brown just went out there and put a pace on the guy that he'd never seen before and knocked him out in round 2, which people are saying is one of the best KOs of the year. He's riding such great momentum as compared to Bonfim, who people are just touting as this guy who probably lost a split decision to a 41-year-old. And if he can survive these takedowns and this stays on the feet, the striking defense of Bonfim to me just isn't there to withstand the shots that Randy Brown puts out and the power that Randy Brown has. I mean, he throws everything with mean intentions. I have Randy Brown winning this one by KO. I touched on, Luke, I think it'll come later, maybe not round 3, but rounds 4 or 5 when Bonfim starts to slow down. I don't see Randy Brown laying off the gas here, and I think he puts this one away pretty comfortably. Like I said, I'm just astonished by the fact that he's an underdog in this fight.
Yeah, one thing to note, neither guy has fought 5 rounds. Curious to see what this fight looks like if it does go past 3, but you'd probably think it favors Randy Brown, right? Like, wouldn't you guys think past 3 favors Randy Brown?
I mean, I that's what I was. It slipped my mind that it was a 5-round fight. I mean, I just can't see. Bonfim's grappling's good, but he's not good enough like Hamzat level where he can just hold DDP down. Like he can't put on that performance against a guy like Randy Brown. And as soon as Randy Brown gets out of there, he's putting a pause on him. I just can't see it.
I mean, all right, so Gabriel Bonfim does have very good grappling, is able to control people. His takedown accuracy, his takedown percentage, it's not like he takes you down at a super high clip. Randy Brown has decent takedown defense, but he will get him down. Like I do see Gabriel Bonfim probably winning the early rounds if he doesn't get clipped. At least the first round. Maybe the second round too. But in a 5-round fight, like you saw what you were touching on, Ryan, his striking defense against, granted, Wonder Boy is such a dynamic, special kind of striker. Like that is very hard to like really compare to Randy Brown's striking, but he was getting clipped and optically he did not look good, man. Like the body language didn't really look great either. At that point, he was kind of just panic wrestling against Wonder Boy and he's able to find some takedowns, didn't do anything with them. I don't think he's going to sub Randy Brown, a lot of which you kind of took the words out of my mouth, Ryan. Like once it gets around to like 3, 4, 5, I kind of see Randy Brown putting the pause on him and I don't see him losing those rounds. So I'm going to go Randy Brown as well. That's a full squad ride sweep on an underdog main event, which we're not good at doing. Actually, like really bad at doing. So
Turn this shit around.
It's also a pick 'em though, basically. So
yeah, time to right the ship here. It's time to fucking right the ship here, boys. Let's pick up a win. You know, get the momentum back. But with all that being said, I have nothing left to add. I don't know if any of you boys have anything before we call it a night.
Yeah, I mean, you just said ship. It reminded me it's November. Shout out to Edmund Fitzgerald. I'll be drinking a beer for it tonight. Rest in peace to all them sailors. We don't forget about you, boys.
100%. Thank you all for tuning in and have a great night. And shout out Max Jimenez again. Fuck yeah, let's go, Max. All right.